Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads. I'm so excited that you're back with me because today I want to talk about fantasy and sci-fi books that were written by non-US authors. The reason why I'm doing is because I think it's super important to have a diverse reading because it's frankly just entertaining to get to see other writing styles and people from other cultures, especially cultures that are different than the typical Western culture, have actually a very interesting writing style. And fantasy books in particular are usually influenced by their culture, by their lore, which makes it just so much more entertaining to read, especially things like fantasy and sci-fi books. So I'm going to talk about 7 books. I'm very honest, just 2 of those are sci-fi. That's mainly because sci-fi is new to me and I just started reading sci-fi. So 5 fantasy books, 2 sci-fi books. And I separate it a little bit by region and then we go from there. Let's start with Europe. And with Europe, I actually mean UK. Because the first 3 books are from authors from the UK, starting with An Ember in the Ashes. And that's kind of actually a bonus book because I liked the first book. I did not like the rest of the series as much. I mean, it was fun, but the ending kind of... No, that was not for me. But An Ember in the Ashes is a YA fantasy story inspired by the Roman mythology. And it's about a young girl that is sneaked into a school because she has a job to do to help her family in there. And then meets one of the young warriors of the school. And then their fate is entangled and the story ensues from there. There is also some Middle Eastern inspired fantasy in here, which I really enjoyed. So it's an interesting mix. While it is a UK author and you might expect like more European style fantasy, it's actually an interesting mix of that Roman history and then Middle Eastern inspired history. And it has the typical YA lightheartedness going on. There's a bit of a love story happening, but because of that fantasy genre mix, I think it is worth spending your time on. The next one is Empire in Black and Gold by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who's also a UK author. And well, I don't know if there's like a word for more than author because he publishes so many books, it's ridiculous. This man writes so many fantasy and sci-fi books, it's ridiculous. But all of them have a very unique twist to them. As an example, Empire in Black and Gold is, while they are humans, participating in everyday life, but those humans have insect traits. They're called kindin. And then you have moth kindin, wasp kindin, fly kindle, beetle kindin. So they all have insect traits. And it's what Adrian Tchaikovsky is really good at, and why I enjoy reading his books in general so much, is he is incredibly great in writing about different cultures and the history of those cultures, how they came to be, what their challenges are, and explaining more about their life, their history, why they act the way they do, and all of those kind of things. And I find stuff like that incredibly fascinating. So if you enjoy world building like this, Adrian Tchaikovsky is an amazing author, and especially the Shadows of the Apt series. Well, I've only read book 1 so far. I just started book 2, so I'm careful what I'm saying here, but based on what I've read so far in the Shadows of the Apt series, it's incredible. It's so good. The next book is Zat by Joanna Kavanagh, who is also a UK author. And this is more of a sci-fi book, and it kind of has this AI taking over the world and everything goes wrong trope, sprinkled in with a little bit of British humor. And that's what I love about this book. So it's not a super dense sci-fi. It's actually pretty straightforward and good explained, even though they talk about AI algorithm and stuff like that. It's not that you need a degree in data science in order to understand what's going on there. And it has a little bit of a thriller style to it, meaning it's not hard sci-fi. It's more like a thriller that plays in the future, if that makes any sense. Highly recommend that book if you want to maybe get started with sci-fi, or if you want to have something lighter that falls into the sci-fi category but is not completely dense with actual science. Now let's move a little bit further east, and I'm saying Middle East with quotation marks because I know countries like India kind of sometimes are considered Middle East, sometimes not. So that's why I'm saying Middle East with quotation marks, because one of the authors is from India. And that is my second sci-fi book that I want to mention here, which is Machinehood. And that one blew me away. I loved this book so much. I loved S.B. Devier's writing style. The world that book played in was just super fascinating. And she too set up a world where you learn more about a different culture, where you experience certain things like how the people interact with each other, family values, how work is seen, how religion is seen. Because one of the things that is very interesting of this book, she mixes science fiction with religion in a really good way, I have to say. It is Middle Eastern inspired. So it is a fascinating mix of learning about another culture while you're reading a sci-fi book about a situation. You're in a world where you have gig jobs and you have to just figure out what's going along. And one of those gig job workers is hired as a security guard, and all of a sudden the person she is protecting is attacked by kind of a terrorist group. And she is figuring out, so what is it? Is it really a terrorist group? The humans in the world are supported by different pills, so they help you think better or they help you get stronger. So humans can compete with machines, with robots, because that's what the world has come to, that robots took over jobs, but humans still needed jobs, so they had to enhance themselves of some sort, in order to keep, working. So very fascinating world, and a very interesting angle that Asbi Divya is taking here, I find. Definitely worth a read. The next Middle Eastern one is Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar, who is from Saudi Arabia, and that is a really dark, gory fantasy book, and it has the tag of Arabian Nights meets Game of Thrones, something of in that regards, and it couldn't be more true. Usually I ignore things, especially if something is compared to Game of Thrones, because just because it's fantasy, it's not Game of Thrones. But this one, oh my goodness, yes. So you have everything there: political intrigue, weird family relationships, a lot of gore and blood, random deaths where what just happened here, and a really interesting Middle Eastern inspired setting. So you have jinn as an example, and you learn a lot about the religion of that time. And it's not just Middle Eastern inspired. I think there's also some Roman mythology inspiration in there. So it is a really fascinating mix. It's incredibly good, fast-paced writing style, and I loved book 1. There's a book 2 in the series already. There's a prequel, like a .5 book in the series that you can actually get for free if you sign up for the author's newsletter, I think. I'll put the link down below just in case you're interested. And it's supposed to be a trilogy, if I remember that correctly. Great self-published fantasy book. Let's move a little bit further towards Malaysia, and an author from Malaysia is Cassandra Kaw, and she wrote a series where the first book is, or the first 2 books in one omnibus, I guess, is Food for the Gods, and there's a 3rd book to it. So you have book 1 and 2 in one, and then book 3 as a standalone. That is the thing that is a bit weird about this series, because if you go on Goodreads, it tells you it's book 4 and 5, but I'm not sure what the 3 books before have to do with those 2 books. I don't know. Anyway, I started with Food of the Gods, which is book 1 and 2 in that Rupert Wong series, and it's about a chef who is preparing meals for ghouls, but those meals are humans. So already starting out quirky, and then he gets hired by a Dragon King to protect their land, essentially, from some European monsters, quote unquote, not monsters, but there is some Greek mythology, influence as part of that. And it is incredibly quirky. It's an urban fantasy setting with a lot of humor. While I had some difficulties with the writing, I think there's just some things got lost in translation is my assumption. I'm not 100% sure. This was one fast-paced and witty urban fantasy book, which includes a lot of different religions and mythology settings, like a little bit, again, Malaysian culture and a little bit Greek mythology. There's a little bit general Asian-inspired things going on. There's a lot of stuff, and it's just fun. He goes into hell and comes back, and just the dialogue is a lot of fun, how he interacts with the ghouls and conversations with his girlfriend, and it's just so out of this world that you're sitting there. I mean, it's a wild ride. That book is definitely a wild ride. It is so fascinating to experience something that different. And then finally, with my last book, we are going down under. Well, kind of. We're actually going to New Zealand, and that's H.D. Perry's A Declaration of the Rights of Magicians. And I have a review about that, so I will not dwell on that book, but I loved it because it is a French Revolution retelling with fantasy elements, and it has all sorts of things, including vampires, magicians, and whatnot in there. That's probably the most classical when it comes to European style fantasy or Western style fantasy out of all the books that I'm talking about. But because of that French Revolution setting and that basically being a fantasy book that is a historical fiction retelling of French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, incredible. So I highly recommend that duology. Just know that it is rather slow paced compared to pretty much all the other books that I just talked about. That's what I wanted to share with you. These are some of my favorite fantasy and science fiction books from non-US authors that I read in 2021. And I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Let me know in the comments, what is a non-US author that you really enjoy reading from or that you have discovered in the last year? I definitely want to expand my circle in that regards. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos from me. Like my video if you actually liked it. And then I hope I see you soon with my next video. Till then, have a great rest of your day. Bye!